Show that it is 9 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning. I call this hearing to order. My name is Troy Hawk. I am one of the legal counsels for the Nebraska Department of Education, and I will be the presiding officer conducting the hearing virtually today, December 17th, 2025, using Zoom on the proposed revisions to Title 92, Nebraska Administrative Code, Chapter 51, or Rule 51, Regulations and Standards for Special Education Programs. The legal notice of hearing was published for this hearing in the Omaha World Herald on November 14th, 2025. To begin the hearing, a Nebraska Department of Education staff member will describe and explain the proposed rule. This will be followed by testimony by interested persons. Each person presenting written or oral testimony is requested to state and spell your first and last name and provide a general indication of where you live. The city, county, or school district is sufficient. Then state a concise suggestion or recommendation of what action you would like the board to take, and state the rationale or reason for your recommendation. You may reinforce, but please refrain from repeating previous testimony. Each person testifying will be limited to 5 minutes. If additional time is needed, it may be provided at the discretion of the presiding officer. At the conclusion of all testimony from interested persons, the Nebraska Department of Education staff member who opened on the rule will have the opportunity to respond to the testimony presented today, which will conclude the testimony. The testimony presented will be recorded, and the recording will be made available to the State Board of Education and the public via YouTube at the time the State Board considers the adoption of this rule. All written testimony must be submitted to the hearing official prior to 5 p.m. today in order to be made a part of the record of this hearing. The email for submitting written comments is nde.rulehearing@nebraska.gov. That's nde.rulehearing@nebraska.gov. This email address may also be found on the department's website at www.education.ne.gov by following the Rules and Regulations link on the right side of the page to the public notices of upcoming rule hearings. At this time, we will begin the hearing on Rule 51, Regulations and Standards for Special Education Programs, with Amy Roan from the Nebraska Department of Education describing and explaining the proposed revisions. Amy, you may begin.
Thank you, Troy. Good morning. My name is Amy Roan, Amyrhone. I work for the Nebraska Department of Education as the administrator for the Office of Special Education. Rule 51 contains regulations and standards for special education programs. Rule 51 is authorized pursuant to Nebraska Revised State Statutes 79-318 and 79-319, as well as regulations necessary to carry out the Nebraska Special Education Act. The last revisions to Title 92 Nebraska Administrative Code, Chapter 51, Regulations and Standards for Special Education Programs, or Rule 51, were approved by the State Board of Education and became effective in May of 2022. In October of 2025, the Rules and Regulations Committee of the State Board of Education discussed policy issues and the need for additional revisions to 92 NAC 51, or Rule 51. The Nebraska Department of Education staff sought input from the Special Education Advisory Council, or SEAC, Results-Driven Accountability, or RDA stakeholders, the Nebraska Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, or NCDHH, and the Nebraska Association of the Deaf, NEAD, to identify policy issues and explore solutions. The Nebraska Department of Education utilizes the Special Education Advisory Council, or SEAC, as an advisory group to aid in the identification of policy issues, propose solutions, and provide feedback to potential revisions. SEAC is an advisory group that includes administrators, teachers, agency support personnel, providers, and parents of students with disabilities. SEAC has provided substantial feedback to the revisions process. Additionally, department staff engaged the Nebraska Commission for the Deaf or Hard of Hearing and the Nebraska Association of the Deaf in the process of identifying policy issues, discussing potential solutions, and providing feedback regarding potential revisions. Based on stakeholder discussions and directions from the Rules and Regulations Committee, department staff created the public input draft of Rule 51. The public input draft was posted on the department website from Friday, October 24th, 2025 through Friday, November 7th, 2025 to allow public input. No public input was received. The proposed revisions aim to, number one, align the language with the IDEA in the allowable use of mediation as the mediation process offers an opportunity for parents and public agencies to resolve disputes about any matter under IDEA. And two, provide flexibility to Nebraska public schools that cannot immediately hire a fully qualified educational sign language interpreter. A summary of the substantive changes from the current Rule 51 contained in the draft rule revision include: number one, revisions to the section of rule that will align regulations to 34 CFR 300.506A. OSEP reviewed the state's IDEA Part B Parents' Rights in Special Education Procedural Safeguard Notice, which is also known as the state's notice, Nebraska Administrative Code Title 92, Chapter 51, and the Nebraska Mediation Brochure. The state's notice related to resolving disputes through a mediation process contains provisions that are consistent with the requirements in 34 CFR 300.506A. However, the state's Rule 51 and the Nebraska Mediation Brochure related to resolving disputes through a mediation process allow parties to disputes involving matters that are only related to the identification, evaluation, or educational placement of the child, or the provision of a free appropriate public education, or FAPE, to the child. The mediation process offers an opportunity for parents and public agencies to resolve disputes about any matter under IDEA. Part B, including matters arising prior to the filing of a due process complaint. This includes matters regarding the identification, evaluation, or educational placement of a child with a disability, or the provision of FAPE to a child with a disability, as well as any other matters arising under IDEA Part B that may not be the subject of a due process complaint. Number two, the revisions to subsection 0.010.06D and 0.010.06E refine the process for hiring and monitoring educational sign language interpreters who have not yet fully met full qualification standards. Key implications include: the proposed changes include the removal of the 2-year time limit and specific competency requirements, instead focusing on completion of a professional development plan. They also offer a shift in oversight of the professional development planning process that is intended to create clearer separation of duties and adds an external layer of oversight for plan approval. Finally, the proposed changes will focus on not measuring progress solely by achieving testing benchmarks. The rule now requires that the interpreter successfully complete the professional development plan. The changes provide districts with slightly more flexibility in employing interpreters who initially do not meet full qualifications, while ensuring accountability through a required, monitored professional development plan that is formally approved at the state program level. This approach prioritizes documented professional growth and structured oversight over a fixed time limit or single testing outcome. Currently, all special education positions within the state and nation are the highest shortage areas for districts to fill. Specialty areas within special education, such as educational sign language interpreters, have always been one of the hardest to attract, prepare, and ultimately retain in education. The revisions proposed to 92 NAC 51 or Rule 51 would assist districts in attracting individuals and ultimately prepare and retaining quality as well as qualified educational sign language interpreters in Nebraska schools. No substantive changes to policy, intent, or program requirements were introduced with this revision.
Thank you, Amy. At this time, I would like to open the floor to any citizen or public testimony. Ms. Peterson and Ms. Whitty, if you would like to testify, please let me know. Seeing no testimony, Amy, is there anything you would like to add at this time?
We have no other additions.
All right, thank you everybody for attending today. This closes the hearing on the proposed revisions to Rule 51. Everyone, please have a great day. Thank you.